Hey, welcome back to Unschooled Theology. Today, let's start with this. If you are following, well, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. That's
That might be
the,
a good
the
idea.
thing
I
we
don't
do
know.
that we always forget to do. So, yeah, I'm one of
That's
your
totally
hosts.
fine.
Yeah, one of your hosts, Derek. With me is Evan. Hello, good day.
Hey, how we doing, good sir?
All right. So, real quick, if you do happen to be watching this on video, you will notice that I have a the same setup but new. So I'm in a new place. We've
It's a
moved.
different
And,
wall.
yeah, still bookcases behind me, but now we're in a standing situation. So
Oh, that's a good deal.
yeah, we can project a little more there,
Yeah,
little
yeah,
better vocally. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I'm not
so
a big
that's what
fan
we're
of
doing.
sitting for a long time, so I mean
Yeah,
that's gonna be a little bit better. I think you think a little bit better on your feet.
hopefully,
Hopefully.
hopefully. Uh, all right. So let's dig in. Today we're starting into Genesis chapter 2, finally, however many dozen episodes this is
Nobody's
at this
counting.
point. Yeah, I guess not. But we're doing Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. So we will read those as we do. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. Okay. So this this is a weird dynamic in the Bible where this is a chapter break,
Yeah.
which
I was wondering about that if we were gonna
yeah,
mention that.
yeah, it's kind of odd. Now, it's important to remember that the chapters or verses aren't in the original text. It's not like when these stories are written down, someone was sitting there writing little numbers next to
Yeah.
every couple of sentences. So that's something that's added later as a reference point. And so to that end, some feel it's kind of odd to put the end of the chapter here
Correct.
before this seemingly final, salvo in this opening story.
Right.
Um, and so I actually don't mind it. I think that the chapter break here, it sort of emphasizes the difference between the first 6 days and the seventh day here. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. There is this creative act going on in the first 6 days, and that sort of wraps up, and it wraps up the end of the chapter, and this begins the next phase with
Yeah.
a new
Yeah.
chapter. um it's so it emphasizes that sort of break in the ordering process that God has going on.
Yeah.
um
I've I
yeah,
it's still it feels still a little awkward to me, but I get that. That does make sense. It feels like it separates the action from the actual break.
yeah,
um i think of uh I think of these stories as being conveyed orally over a long period of
right,
time, and before they're being written down. And so if one were to conceive chapters potentially being an evening's worth of stories,
yeah,
if to break at the end of chapter one and then pick up the next evening by telling and then God rested would seem a little bit odd unless it's its own chapter.
yeah. If
I don't think that's where
if
the
you're doing
chapters
that,
came from, but
right,
it does feel like an odd break, especially the fact that it then goes into following this a completely different narrative, which
yeah.
definitely doesn't feel like any continuity with the resting situation.
So if you're the person putting in these chapter and verse breaks and all of that,
Yeah.
by putting the chapter break here and carrying this story over from one to the next, you signal, I think, to the reader that this seemingly different story that comes next,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about the different ways to view the story of Adam and Eve after we're done here. But you signal sort of the idea that these are related, right? By
Mhm.
keeping them in the same chapter here in chapter 2.
Yeah.
So I think it may be related to that as well.
That's true too.
But
That's true too.
all right, one other thing to note here is the idea of the ongoing seventh day. is something people pull from this section. So you'll note it lacks the normal morning evening ending that we see. And so some will take that to imply that we are still within the seventh day. That is an ongoing thing. Once again, something that the chapter break might be a way of demonstrating that fact or that idea. Now I think, go ahead.
That's an interesting concept because if we're talking about what does it mean for then God to rest,
which we'll get to in the
from
next
his creative act,
yes.
from his creative act, that's significant.
Yes, it definitely is meaningful, and we will get to that idea in the next couple episodes. We'll start to look at rest. Actually, I think 2 episodes in a row we'll be looking at this idea of rest and what that means. But yeah, the idea of that being ongoing is useful, I guess, in thinking about that.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think actually thinking of it as this ongoing seventh day, I think that makes some sense, but not only because of the syntax of this verse, but also because of the idea of, we've been talking about this ordering idea, and God creating man to further that ordering process. And so if we think of the idea of God resting and then allowing humanity to take on that job now, he's done his part and now it's our turn to do our part. That makes sense then, right? With that ongoing seventh day. So in the idea of ongoing rest for God, we see a furthering of the command that we saw on the 6th day, where we're supposed to go forth, multiply and subdue the earth.
Agreed. Well, I think so much of the stemming out of that, I think so much of the act of creation was establishing and writing the rules for the way in which physical reality would function. And so there's a lot of change that happens in the creation and the ordering and the establishing of that. But to suggest that God is now at rest is to imply that those rules are now stable, that those are not going to change going forward. This isn't to discredit miracles, but it is to say that on the whole, God is not actively adjusting the rules for physical reality. And miracles, by definition, are kind of this singular one-time instance, it's not a reestablishment of a new rule.
Not a changing of rules. And so this would very much imply those things are what they are, and God, at least for now, as long as he rests, has no intention of changing them, right? So again, I think I want to highlight the idea of this sort of furthering the command, right? And it's as though God says to us, okay, do these things I told you on day 6, do those, now go forth and do those, and I'll be over here, if you need me, until you reach the point where maybe I'll take over and create again, right? Because we can look at later the idea of the Sabbath for us and it being a cyclical thing every 7 days, right? We could take from that then and look and see the idea that, well, at some point God's rest will end and he will create again, as need be. So all right.
Well, that's can I just do one extension of that idea? If we believe, if we track along with that the 7th day potentially is still occurring, the argument for the days being more than 24 hours becomes more compelling. Because if we could contend that the 7th day could last millennia, then potentially the other days lasted millennia as well. And so it's not that inconceivable. I've never heard that argument before. That's very interesting.
Well, it does lack
nuanced.
it does lack the morning evening. Now, of course, we've been saying that the morning or the evening into morning, that refrain signifies the idea that something's been brought out of chaos into order, right? And while God rests, he doesn't do that, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get to what he does do in the next couple episodes here, because we're going to examine this concept of rest. But
that, you know, could even relate to the chapter break, is that the chapter break brings us into a form of the present. So the 6 days are telling the story, but if the seventh day is potentially ongoing, it's a bringing us in God's time frame, I suppose, bringing us into the era that we are existing in now. It is the era of God resting.
Yes,
which is pretty profound. That's interesting.
All right, so we'll leave it here. It's a little bit of a shorter one, but the rest component is going to take 2 parts. So no need to get further into that now. But I just want to leave people with this one idea. You know, where God's rest begins is where our work begins, and that's what I kind of take from this last section here when we pair it with the instructions of day 6. You know, and with humanity being that kind of capstone, that final piece of creation, God has now created the thing which allows him to rest and no longer have to, you know, directly perform this ordering task, as we've talked about so far in Genesis 1. And so that's where we step in, and that's where our role comes. So all right, so until next time, like, follow, subscribe, all of those different things wherever you are, whatever video platform or audio platform. Leave reviews if that's possible, comment, hit us up with an email, unschooledtheology@protonmail.com, and we will see you soon. Thanks.